this morning. Millions of Americans under air quality alerts, major disruption to travel because of that wildfire smoke coming from Canada. And joining us now is the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for making time for us. What's your message to travelers trying to cope with all this smoke and now maybe stranded or dealing with some significant delays?
Well, unfortunately, this smoke is impacting visibility in a big way, particularly in the airports in the New York area, LaGuardia, JFK, Newark, the airports in the D.C. area, Baltimore, Dulles, and DCA, and then also Philadelphia. So there have been ground delay programs. As of now, there are no ground stops, but those were required earlier today at some of those airports. And we're going to be seeing this for a while. If there's good news, it's that this has led to relatively few cancellations. We've been able to keep the system going through ground delay programs, but certainly if you're planning a trip today or in the next few days, you want to keep close tabs on the airline information that you can get through your app, because it's very likely if you're going through these affected airports that those delays are going to affect you, and some of these are major hubs, so of course that's going to have impacts on through the system for these airlines as well.
Yeah, according to FlightAware, nearly 5,000 flights were delayed yesterday. It seemed like this happened very quickly. What are you doing proactively today to get flights in the air as best you can?
Well, FAA has a lot of experience dealing with low visibility situations. So on a very regular basis, not only are there end of day and beginning of day coordination sessions at the center, sitting side by side with airline operational leaders, but that gets refreshed on an every 2-hour cadence to try to optimize and coordinate every way we can. At the same time, the conditions are what they are, and so it is going to mean there will be continued concern as long as you have those visibility problems. Typically, if you have to do a ground delay program because there's a lot of fog, the fog lifts, and by a certain point in the day, visibility is restored. What's unusual about this volume and this intensity of smoke is it's creating the same kind of visibility conditions that you would see if you had foggy conditions or a storm system coming through, but they are persisting for hours and even for days. But there's excellent coordination happening between the airlines, the FAA, to try to make sure that those issues are being taken in stride, that the delays can be accommodated, done as efficiently as possible. And of course, most importantly of all, the top priority anytime we face any disruption or anything else impacting the system is always going to be safety. And even if that means things have to go more slowly, FAA is going to make sure that every flight is going safely.
My eyes are getting itchy. I feel like a scratch in my throat forming just looking at some of the images we've been showing with those sort of brownish, orangish skies. It was thick here in New York, certainly yesterday, walking around a little bit. I wish I had grabbed a mask when I walked out the door, but I felt like we didn't get a whole lot of warning. Do you think there was anything more that could have been done to get people ready?
This did arrive pretty suddenly. Obviously, I'm no meteorologist. I don't know how predictable or not those wind patterns are that are carrying this. What I do know is that, from a flight safety perspective, we can get detailed information and make reasonable predictions into the coming hours that will help make the best of the situation that we have as we try to get those hubs back up to normal status. But I felt it getting into heading to work this morning. I think a lot of Americans in the eastern half of the U.S. are experiencing something that, of course, Americans in the West have been no stranger to over several recent years. Just the shocking experience of opening the door, looking out the window, and seeing a sky that doesn't look the way it's supposed to look. And it's one more reason why we need to be paying a lot of attention to resilience and sustainability as we go deeper into this part of the 21st century.
Look, I'm a Coloradan. I spent also about a decade in the Pacific Northwest, and you're right. These wildfires are something people who live in that part of the country have had to deal with for a long time. What's so shocking this time is it's the smoke coming from our neighbors to the north, and people are pointing to this as a sign of the warming planet, right? It's just the beginning, unfortunately, of what we could continue to see. Do you agree? And is our infrastructure at all ready?
We have been warned that whether we're talking about wildfires or storms, there are going to be more frequent, more extreme events in our lifetime. And yes, we are working to prepare our infrastructure for this. Part of what's in President Biden's infrastructure package, the bipartisan infrastructure law, is a first of its kind, multi-billion-dollar program to make our infrastructure more resilient, because there are so many different ways that our transportation infrastructure is being affected. Today, in an obvious way, this wildfire smoke affecting flights. A couple days ago, I was in North Dakota, where we're helping to take out a railroad crossing that's been a headache in that community. They were telling me some of the roadways and runways have been buckling, and this is something that's happening in many parts of the country due to extreme heat. Transit systems have been affected. So we have funding that's now going into making our infrastructure more resilient in a way that just realistically recognizes that if what used to be, for example, a 1,000-year flood is now a frequent occurrence, there's some roads in this country that need to go to a different place than where they were before. Now, we're not just taking this as it comes. We're also trying to prevent it from getting worse than it has to. And that's why we're focused on more sustainable infrastructure for the future. It's why we're getting those EV chargers out there. It's why we're making sure there are more excellent and clean public transit options out there. We're buying zero-emission buses for cities. That means cleaner air every day, and doing our part with the climate challenge. And even for parts of the transportation sector that are very hard to move to a zero emissions platform. Think maritime and the way our ships work. Think aviation. We're also working on more sustainable aviation fuels, more sustainable ways to propel the ships that our supply chains count on. I think this will be a big topic of discussion when I'm meeting with my counterparts at the G7 next week as we come together in Japan to chart a course for the years ahead. These problems are not going away. We have to be prepared for them, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, for joining us.